Holy cow, they really expect me to drink a lot of water.
Gotta hydrate.
Whew.
You're at altitude. Hydrate.
I won't make it through the first talk if I drink all that. Well, you all are blessed because those who canceled, was that really my phone? No, it wasn't. Okay, good. Those who canceled, they're going to miss some amazing information. This information that I have for you, I experienced. It's always, unfortunately, the way I have to learn the greatest things in my life is I have to go through them myself. So I chose just really 3 topics, but the first one is the most important because this really is a topic that applies to many conditions that you're seeing and is actually part of the cause. And it's Sibo, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And you don't realize, oh, there it is. It's not, okay. Whoops, I'm sorry. I had it. You don't realize how many people have this. It's because we just chalk it up as another gut issue. However, SIBO is a problem for many conditions like thyroid, believe it or not, even cancer, they're linking SIBO to now. Of course, Crohn's colitis, and I just read a statistic yesterday, so I didn't get to put it in my PowerPoint, but it's 92% of irritable bowel is actually unresolved SIBO, and nobody is figuring out the SIBO. So, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. Has there been anyone here that hasn't heard of that before? Okay. Well, basically, this is what it is. But what you might not know is SIBO is actually caused by not necessarily bad guys, although it could be caused by guys that we think are bad, but it's still guys that typically do fine in our colon. But the moment they end up in our small intestine, they cause massive disrupt. It can even be the good guys like lactobacillus, et cetera, but things like E. coli and these types of things actually play a role as well. All right, let me back up and tell you my personal experience. So I had 2 different bouts of SIBO. One was after I had cavitation surgery done. Does anyone in here not know what cavitations are? Don't be afraid if you don't, because then I don't want to speak over you. Okay, there's one. So a cavitation is an infection in your jaw. Typically, it occurs of an area where there was a root canal or is a root canal, or an area where you got a tooth extracted. So if you had wisdom teeth out as a teenager, you have an 88% chance of developing a cavitation infection in the jaw. But unfortunately, it takes 20, 25 years before it starts to really cause problems. It drives autoimmune. It drives unexplainable illnesses. And it drives a lot of problems that we don't associate with the cavitation. So I went and my friend Jerry from New York, who you all know, I had a partially impacted wisdom tooth. Wasn't even extracted. I only had one wisdom tooth taken out in my life because I was fearful of this. And I got it done, this one up here, extraction. I got it done by a biological dentist. Okay, so fast forward now 20, 25 years, I don't know exactly. Jerry goes, there's a pocket, which is pockets hold infection. And anything above 3 millimeters is a problem, and it drives infection. It typically wrecks your gut microbiome. So there was a 9 millimeter pocket. That's basically, and I had 3 9 millimeter pockets. And that basically is disease state. I mean, that's a gum disease right there. So Jerry went in and he looked at, went in and started realizing that there's tons of infection under here. Dan, I've got to take the wisdom tooth. So it was kind of spur of the moment. He takes the wisdom tooth out. Well, I was in another seminar in New York, and 2 days later, this is healing wonderful. I have inflammation up here in the top left quadrant. Very painful all of a sudden, swelling. Now it's causing a headache. Oh, and now my gut starts not doing right, the normal things. Anyway, I said, Jerry, did you touch anything on my upper left? No. I said, well, I know what happened. The bacteria mobilized from here to here, which they do. They're that smart. They want to survive. I didn't know because I didn't get something called a cone beam done, which is a 3D x-ray where you look at where you have cavitation. But because I knew I had a wisdom tooth out and I know about cavitation, I knew what happened. So I was flying out that next day and Jerry couldn't get me in. So I dealt with it with natural methods. The inflammation went down and I made another appointment for like 2 months. So bottom line is I knew I had this cavitation up there. Now I start getting sensitivity on the tooth in front. So now I know what happened. Because I didn't get it second mistake, maybe the third, because I didn't get it taken care of right away, it started moving under the tooth in front because the cavitation grew and the bacteria got worse. So I go back to Jerry and we deal with that. I should have got a cone beam done there, but he deals with that cavitation. And he thought he got it all, but it went further under because I didn't have a cone beam done. I should have got a cone beam, but it went under that tooth even further than we thought. So I went back to Utah. It was after that I ended up with a severe Sibo reaction. That means that any fiber I ate, vegetable, fruit, whatever, I got bloating afterwards, some weird gut stuff that no matter what I did wasn't working. Fast forward, I end up going back, and sure enough, this time I do a cone beam x-ray, 3D x-ray, and then we see the infection all the way up under that tooth. He had to pull that tooth, so I lost the tooth in front. And this time, we got all the infection in the mouth, but I still had a problem here. So, a few lessons there. Number one, these bacteria mobilize, and they'll mobilize to a different place in the mouth. They'll mobilize to a different place in the body, anywhere there's a weakness. So, here's what happened. It not only went in my gut, it went in my upper cervical spine. And where old injury, but all of a sudden that week, I couldn't even turn my head. I got pain and arthritis that quick, inflammation. So this went on. I did natural things. I tried this, I tried that. And really, that never resolved until I got stem cells. Now I could turn my head all the way again. But the lesson is this type of bacteria can mobilize. That's why, by the way, that protocol for a dentist is giving antibiotics anytime they mess with any bacteria in the mouth, even clean these pockets out, even in some cases, even just clean your teeth, because these things can mobilize and end up in the heart, cause a heart attack. So recently, a client of mine, Ben, from Australia, I tell him this, and knowing his history, I said, you better take the antibiotic, Ben, after he clears out this cavitation. And Ben didn't, because he was worried about his gut. Unfortunately, those bacteria mobilized to his heart. Ben ended up in the hospital, and Ben almost died. And Ben had severe crushing chest pain, which I'm texting him, get to the hospital now. I knew it happened. So Ben made the same mistake I made, except mine didn't go to my heart, fortunately. So when I always say there's a time and a place for antibiotic, this may be the time and the place, number one. When you're dealing with pathogens in the mouth, you're talking about the most deadly thing on the planet. A lot of SIBO, a lot of gut issues originate in the mouth. A lot of sinus issues, a lot of unexplainable illnesses start in the mouth. And of course, we've talked enough about mercury in amalgam fillings, but I'm talking about hidden infections, even from pockets, teeth that have been extracted years ago, root canal. I've seen it all. I have seen it all. And with the advent of cone beam x-rays, we have a diagnostic tool that we didn't have some years before. But caution, dentists think they know how to read cone beam x-ray, but they read them like a plain film. It's not. They have to have the right software. it rotates it. You have to look at things sideways because what's there this way will not be there this way or vice versa. So you have to know what you're looking for when you read a cone beam. Carolyn, are you in the room? You know how to read one. Okay, so here's a dentist that actually is trained on a cone beam. Now, most dentists, they don't have cone beam. So your dentist has to refer you out to one of these units because they're like $250,000, I'm sure, right? Yeah, they're huge. Yeah, so 150 minimum. So the average dentist isn't going to have this 3D CAT scan in their office. They give you a reference out for it. But look, a lot of early death, a lot of heart attacks, a lot of strokes, a lot of cancer. We know the root canals on the side of breast cancer, and I've had several of these cases. So, I urge any of you, if you've ever had a wisdom tooth out, if you had a root canal, a tooth extraction, get a cone beam and don't play around with these bacteria. It almost took me. And I can tell you a lot of different stories that I have about how these bacteria mobilize themselves. So, upstream, look here. All right, so that was one way I ended up with severe SIBO. Second way, perhaps even more crazy. How many of you have a reverse osmosis system? They're great. They're the least expensive, most efficient forms of filtration. So the problem is that I was in a mastermind in Park City, and it was me, Joe Mercola, a guy named Robert Slovak, Ben Greenfield, masterminding, Naomi Whittle. There was probably 10 of us in the room, all of which have RO units. Robert Slovak is kind of like the guy who, him and his brother, they actually brought RO into the marketplace. And Robert started telling us what happened, why RO units are all contaminated inherently. And my close platinum group here, you were at my house, and I showed you that, and I told you the story. But they become more efficient from when they first introduced these into the marketplace, meaning that in the old days, you'd empty the darn tanks, the 3-gallon tanks, and you'd have to wait for it to fill up, a real pain in the butt. Well, they've gotten better to where you don't even empty them ever. They're like, and they fill up, so you're only really working out of this much water. Problem is the butyl lining that are in these systems are a perfect, really breeding ground for heterotrophic type of bacteria. So because you're not emptying the systems, the bacteria build up in that butyl lining. So they all have them. The only way not to have them is if you emptied the unit 3 or 4 times a week all the way. Who's going to do that? Because you wouldn't think to do that. Or in the instructions, they tell you there's a warning, and it tells you how to clean it, like twice a month. Who's going to do that? It takes like an hour to clean the darn thing. So nobody. The problem is that they build up this heterotroph, this nasty bacteria, and it wreaks havoc. Now, look, if you're healthy and you have good stomach acid, you'll kill it. The problem is, if you're a faster, an intermittent faster, you naturally have lower acidity during a fast. It's normal. Every time I would fast, I would get these symptoms, like it's crampy. I mean, and it started to happen even when I would intermittent fast, to the point where I was like, I don't even want to drink water. I'm just better without it. I didn't know what was happening. My low acidity, which is normal during a fasting state, was actually allowing the heterotroph to actually exist and take over. And I ended up with a severe SIBO again. So there's my 2 SIBO stories. But as it turns out, always in my life, God works all things for good. And I just pray that I could just learn a lesson without the hard things. Lord, let me learn without going through it so hard. That's what scares me, honestly. It does. It really scares me, because it's like, can't I learn anything easier way? I must be really stubborn servant of the Lord there. Anyways, so let me share with you what I learned. And I promise you, you're blessed to be here, because my wife will tell you, when I'm sitting on something, I am on it. I mean, it's like I'll be on it till 11 o'clock at night. I'll be on it that every gap I have in my schedule, I'm reading. My desktop fills up with papers, research, articles. I mean, it just goes crazy. So I try to make it as simple as I could for you. So let's see what I learned. So these are the biggest culprits that I found out. Lactobacilli. I mean, come on, these are great guys. Bacteroides. I mean, those are the ones that prevent autoimmune. These guys can cause this. E. coli and strep. Those are the biggest culprits. And again, none of those are bad. It's just when they exist in the colon in balance, great. But when they end up in your small intestine, oh, not so good. So, what tests can we do? Well, these are the breath tests. And with a proper breath test, you have to take basically a sugar type of solution to aggravate it, which who wants to do that because you get bloated out like crazy. The other problem with the testing is some of the bacteria are much lower in the small intestine, further down, and you get a lot of negatives, false negative tests. So, not a fan of testing. And here's the other reason why I'm not a fan of testing. The symptoms are so clear. Why test? Well, if you do get a positive, you can test. There's typically two types of bacteria groups. One that produces a gas called methane, which you're familiar with, and the other that produces a gas called hydrogen, which you're familiar with. So you could technically say, well, I have methane guys. I have uh, hydrogen guys because there's certain killers that work better for some than the other. So, all right, well, that would be a good reason to test. Well, here's the problem. As soon as you kill the hydrogen guys, what happens is now the methane guys take over. So you end up with a methane problem guy. So it's like you end up just having to kind of assume you have both, and you have to go after both of them. So if that's the case, these are typically the main symptoms. You can pull that up there. These are the main types of symptoms people have. Pain in the gut. You start getting pain in the gut, especially in the middle of the night. It'll just kind of happen. Bloating, diarrhea, constipation. Some people actually do end up with fevers. Obviously, it starts to affect your appetite. I had said that, this is really linked to a lot of different types of conditions. And this is why, and I just pulled this one to show you. Fibromyalgia, right? Unexplainable, bizarre illness. Well, the bacteria cause a lot of problems, and you'll see some things here that are in common. Inflammation, of course, the mitochondrial issues, which you'll see this in common. But the bacteria, one of the things that it produces is lactic acid, which is a neurotoxin, and it's a poison. Then the other one is the hydrogen sulfide. That's a neurotoxin as well, and it causes poisoning to many of the aspects of the cell and the body and the cells. And then this one, it causes a deficiency in serotonin. It causes melatonin deficiency, which affects the mitochondria, creates oxidative stress. So, just showing you how, it can cause fibromyalgia, but it can show you how it leads to cancer and how it leads to all these other inflammatory types of conditions. So, look, there's many causes, okay? But look at this list because we're going to build upon this. So, obviously, low stomach acid. I said that was what was common with me in a fasting state because I was getting exposed to something. So, here's what can happen to somebody fasting. They're in a fasting state, they have low acidity, but what if their bacteria is coming from their mouth and not their RO unit like it happened to me, right? That could be a problem. Low digestive enzymes. Now, again, we're going to see reasons for why other people might have low stomach acid, which can lead to SIBO. Low digestive enzymes. That could be people with pancreatic problems, liver problems, etc. Ileocecal valve. We'll talk about that. That's an issue. But again, there's causative factors for why the ileocecal valve would be a player. This migrating motor complex, this is a big deal in this. And I learned this throughout this process. That complex, they call it the MMC. It basically, its job is to sweep up after a meal. And there's two phases to this complex. And basically, it literally just gets rid of debris. It's neurological. It's stimulated from the vagus nerve, and it just starts moving out the debris. Well, what I found is this is probably the biggest culprit. Multiple things can go wrong here, from upper cervical issues, cranial issues, but also certain toxins. Neurotoxins can affect this, certain exposures to certain bacteria. So, again, a lot of reasons why that system fails. We'll talk about that. Of course, the HPA axis, that'll affect motility issues as well. And, that's when, again, neurotoxic people are more prone to this because the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, when it's off, it can affect and create SIBO. The problem is the SIBO is way more dangerous than just weak adrenals, way more dangerous, way more problematic, and leads to way more diseases. And by the way, if you have a patient who is just not getting well, I'm telling you, we've talked a lot about the gut here, and we've talked a lot about the microbiome, but I'm telling you, this is the reason why these people aren't getting well. It's a SIBO issue. So you feel a little bit more blessed about being in the room with such a small group? And I'm going to open it up because I want to move into this and I really want to involve you. I'm going to take advantage. There's an advantage of being here because if we had a bigger audience, we couldn't get as personal, but I'm going to make sure I able to bring you into this conversation because I think we'll take it from here to here if I do that. So we're going to make sure that happens. All right, so, and of course, weak vagal nerve creates motility issues as well. And again, many reasons for that, from upper cervical problems, neurotoxic issues, people locked in sympathetic dominance, which we'll have to build on that as well because that can be a problem. And again, I want to bring some answers that I found. Hypothyroid. A lot of your thyroid people, SIBO becomes a complicating factor that feeds back into why you can't fix the thyroid. So once I learned all this, I started going at these cases that I was stuck on and literally was like, hey, make an appointment with so-and-so, make an appointment with so-and-so. I think I have a different answer. It was an answer. These people, I didn't even diagnose them with SIBO, but I looked back at their symptoms. I'm like, they have so many problems. I didn't even realize they had SIBO because their digestion just sucked. And I was just not thinking SIBO. That was me. Hormone imbalance. Most people that have hormone imbalance end up with SIBO. It feeds back into the system. Why? Because certain hormones, I don't know if I have that PowerPoint in here or not, certain hormones are linked to slow motility. I didn't know that. Found it out. All right, RO units, told you that one already. Too many probiotics after a fast. Oh, by the way, actually, that happened to me on a fast years ago. And that one didn't last long. I was an easy one to clear out. But I did that because, again, it's normal. And if you've watched my videos on Facebook, I tell you why it's so important to break a fast correctly because your motility is slower. It's just normal until it gets up to gear, right? That's why you reduce your calories and you don't, eat certain things until you get, down the road. Well, I just started loading up on fermented food. My motility was slower. So where did the fermented food stop? In my small intestine. And they just expanded. And that didn't work out well. I learned everything the hard way. You're laughing because that probably happened to you. Yeah, it did. See, we've all done that. Okay, so anyways, cavitations happened to me. I told you that. Reflux meds are a common cause. Think about it. They're lowering what? Yeah, exactly. Birth control, there's one that you wouldn't think of. And of course, antibiotics. Everybody thinks of that one. I hit that, but I'm not hitting it. Maybe I should point it there. All right, we're stuck. What did I do? I did something, Tyson. All right, there it is. But that was him, not me. Is this working, Tyson? You want to check it? Here, let me go back. Yeah, not working. Okay. Yeah, so the protocol really consists of those things: the diet, natural killers, even antibiotics. I'm going to talk about that because I've had 2 cases that simply weren't responding. It was that deep. And go away, please. Go away now. Um, so we'll talk about when a use of antibiotics and which ones, because there can be a clever way to do that. Classic mistakes. This will probably be the best part because this is where you learn the most, always. Yeah, here lies the key. I'm glad I said that. And then in that, I'll give other tips and tricks that I learned. Okay, so t- I think y'all get these slides. If not, take pictures because this is the core um, of the things that work. So on the one side there, you have on the left side, you have your killers, right? These are the things that we want to rotate. You don't want to take all of these, okay? So don't be, oh my God, someone will go home and the people that aren't here, they'll end up getting the PowerPoints and they're just going to take all those and they're going to be blown out. Typically I like to do 2 or 3 at a time, different combinations, because bacteria are clever and you want to rotate them in and out because bacteria are clever. And when you're using natural things, you have to be even more clever with them. So obviously, these two are very common that we use for bacteria. VIVI, I know, but it's very amazing for bacteria. Obviously, the cat's claw is great for bacteria. Tyra-Chi is here for a reason because one of the classic mistakes is that there's co-infections that keep these guys going and they protect themselves in and around co-infections. Candida is one of the co-infections that I found that a lot of people actually don't address, and certain people can't get well unless you address the Candida. I actually found that out by accident. Then I went on some blogs. One of the little tricks I do is I go on certain blogs and I will spend hours just reading what people have to say. I learn a lot from people. And I'll look at a certain symptom and then I'll say, what did they say? What did they do? And then I'll track it. Well, and so you learn a lot from very sick people. Very sick people become very smart about their problem. And I want to know everything that they know because I'm assuming they've spent, hours and hours and hours beyond me reading about their problem. So anyways, you learn things and you try things. I already said that E. coli is a big player. So the EC it works wonders. I had a case where I just added EC and it was like, boom, SIBO was over. I wish they were all that way. It's just that one was. In fact, EC is so good that it cleared it out that quick, but not every one of these is caused by E. coli. In that case, that was the dominant. But I was smart though too. I went after E. coli. I had some Candida stuff in there and I had some other bacteria stuff in there. So I used 3 products. I'll tell you the one that I use every time with every case, and it was the one that really answered my question because I used them all. But it wasn't until Shane gave me the idea, and he probably doesn't even remember, but he did. He said, add WO. And by the way, Shane, and I'm going to be definitely a part of this product, we're actually creating a really nasty bomb, a SIBO bomb product, because Shane, like myself, have battled this. And so it'll be a product like an antibiotic in the sense that you don't just stay on this product, you use it, blow it up, and get in, get out, right? WO is that for me. So I have 2 tricks with WO. So you take a regular capsule and you add, 5, 10, I go after it. I go right for 10 drops, but I don't recommend that for the average person. But I like blowing myself out. So I add 10 drops. And then I will also do an enterically coated capsule. So what I do is I take a capsule like either MBC or the Neurobiotic, and I pull it apart, dump the contents out, blow it out, and fill one of those up. Now, why am I doing that? Why am I doing a regular capsule and an enterically coated capsule? Yeah, exactly. Because remember what I told you, even the problem with the testing is sometimes they're lower in the colon, sometimes they're higher in the colon. And so that, by the way, is a reason why people can't get rid of their SIBO a lot of times, is because whatever they're taking is either affecting it here or here and not where the problem is. So I do them both ways. So I hit it up here and I hit it down here. Does that make sense? In the WO, for whatever reason, I think WO has a nasty effect on some of these good bacteria, whereas like something like grapefruit seed extract or maybe VIVI doesn't, which is a great thing, right? I mean, number 3 doesn't kill good bacteria, but WO I think has just a nastier effect on some of these guys that are causing SIBO. So I think it acts more like the antibiotics that get rid of some of these good guys that work their way up. So WO, make sure it's in your protocol all the time and do it the way I just taught you. Aloe, AO, is a great formula because inflammation can be problematic because the bacteria kind of hide in the inflammation. And that is an issue, so it is more difficult. So you want to be addressing some of the inflammation. And I don't know, it just seems like aloe. I saw it on the blogs that people are using aloe, and maybe there's another reason for the aloe. But what I found was addressing the inflammation with aloe was a key. But I think there's probably another reason, but it seemed to work. And for the motility, addressing the GA, GB, and the number one with the number one is important. So GB, Hank just taught our group, our platinum group up there. He was saying, look, give GB at night because that's when your pituitary is most active. So a couple of those at night. Give GA late in the afternoon because that's when the adrenals are typically under your most strain. And number one, again, I would say more at night with the GB. But and then Neurosyn, directing the brain. I remember Jack Tips doing a talk and a little bit about SIBO and talking about Neurosyn and its effect on the vagus nerve. So that's a big player as well. And then the enzyme deficiency. We want to deal with the pancreas. We want to deal with, obviously, the gut itself, the liver, and the gallbladder. So that's why we want to support that organ system. And then I just mentioned some individual herbs that you can throw down the pipe. Berberine actually seems to work great because it works against candida, and it also works against bacteria, especially some of these guys that are involved in SIBO. And then this is an important factor. This is another big mistake that people make is they don't deal with this motility issue. Not that these correct it. However, these are needed to treat. So the prokinetics are a big, 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 big important factor. You need to get the food moving through. Otherwise, these debris form and you'll never beat back the bacteria. So you have to make sure the stuff's moving through. So these things are critical. The bind, most of you would say, man, I could never have gotten rid of my SIBO without bind. Andrea, right? Yep. And it's because it acts as a prokinetic and it acts as a binder. So it's at the top of the list for a reason. Hank just taught on the N nerve and the C colon. And Hank, you talked about what does N nerve and C colon do? Peristalsis. That's the way Doc Wheelwright designed it, is to keep things moving through. So it works on that MMC is really what it does, is it keeps those debris moving through. And that's the N nerve. Doc actually, it used to be called the heart nerve. And he designed it around focusing on what nerve? Vagus nerve. So then we just called it N nerve. And C colon. C colon was designed to actually get that peristalsis moving. Ginger is one that is just amazing for that, even just juicing raw ginger. Triphala is an Indian combination of 3 herbs that, again, it's amazing prokinetic. It just keeps things moving through. And fennel, the Mediterraneans would chew fennel after every meal. It's a prokinetic, and it also stimulates digestive enzymes. So there's a win-win, and Triphala does that as well. So anyways, so that's kind of there's your protocol as far as the products go. And again, you're not on all of those, you're rotating them. Even on the prokinetic side, you're changing them up, and that's really important. Grapefruit seed extract, great question. All right, work that time. I said I would talk a little bit about the antibiotics because I've had a few cases where it was life-saving. So rifaximin, or rifaxin, and AKA, this is a unique antibiotic because it doesn't go to the colon. It doesn't go systemic either. So it affects the zero out of the gut. It only affects the small intestine. It's the one that you see on TV with the little worm guy. That's the one they give it for. What condition do they advertise it for? Not SIBO, because no one knows what SIBO is. What condition? IBS, irritable bowel. So in Crohn's and colitis, because remember, 92% of those conditions are caused by SIBO. But it doesn't treat IBS or any of that. It just treats SIBO. That's it. But the cool thing is it doesn't affect your good bacteria in your colon at all. It's gone. It literally doesn't make it that far. Where it can go wrong is it doesn't make it that far. Sometimes it doesn't get down in the small intestine low enough to sometimes take an effect. So oftentimes they put it with neomycin that does go down there. Now neomycin can affect the colon a little more, and some of the good guys in your colon a little more. So I'd say it's a little more destructive. But the rifaximin, it's very effective. I mean, 80+% effective for people who have the worst cases. Really effective. There's a drawback. The drawback is that it's super expensive, and most insurances are not going to pay for it. Okay, but it works. Now, it works better for the diarrhea types. So if you give it to someone who has constipation, they're typically not going to get a positive reaction as well. That's why, again, they put it with neomycin, which actually works better for the constipation people, because the hydrogen producers, right, those are your diarrhea ones, and then your methane producers, your constipation ones. So that's why they give them together, because it affects the methane people and it affects the hydrogen people. However, I wouldn't want someone to take the neomycin unless they absolutely had to, because it is rifaximin. No one has bad symptoms typically from it. I mean, I put the common side effects there, but it's pretty easy on people, honestly. So those are the antibiotics of choice. These are the ones that they will go after this with. And again, time and a place. All right. I can't even get this thing. Yeah, you don't, that one you're going to have more problems with. It's much harder on the colon. You can see one of the less common side effects is bloody stools. So I put it in there because someone might ask about it. All right, the diet gets complicated. The diet does get complicated because no fiber, no sugar, no carbs, no fruit, no vegetables. What's left? Meat and fat. Okay, so it's a carnivore diet. Symptoms go away. One of the things I teach my group is, well, a really good test is if someone has SIBO, put them on a carnivore diet just for 2 days. Oh my God, I feel so much better. Or when people say this to you, I feel better when I just don't eat. It's typically not food allergies. It's typically SIBO. Okay, so those are the questions. Now, with that said, people will say, well, I'm having trouble with the fat. And then so they're not feeling better because they can't break down fat, right? Which is very common with our neurotoxic people. So giving them some bile salts or ox bile help them break down fat. Now look, they can be on a carnivore diet without a lot of fat if that's the case, still to test if they have SIBO. So you just have to give them, meats and different things that aren't as fatty, right? So there's different things like chicken, whatever they do good with. They typically know, they can do eggs. But anyway, so the bottom line is that you can use this diet as a test as well as fasting, but also part of the treatment. Now, what about the Fodmap foods? Those are foods that typically make SIBO go nuts. The high Fodmap foods are foods that actually are really good for your microbiome, right? They actually feed your good bacteria. But with people with SIBO, that's a problem. These are the things that They hate inulin. Oh my God, a product with inulin, that's a prebiotic. They do really bad with that. So what about these two diets? So we have the Sibo diet, which is a carnivore diet, meat and fat, and we have a low FODMAP foods. Both of these can be used, and we need to show you how to do that, okay? So, because there's a time and a place for the diet. And I'll just kind of throw this out there and we'll kind of build on it. But we want to start with a Sibo diet, typically. And then once we start a certain point down the road where we get it in control, then we want to start introducing some of these foods that would flare it up, perhaps, some of the fibrous foods, right? And then we start to bring in maybe some onions in the diet, because onions are hell on this, right? And garlic and all these good foods for us, but that feed our bacteria and make our SIBO miserable. But we don't do that until we get things under control and we're on enough killers that, because here's what happens. They back up into basically the protective places, whether it's the inflammation or the biofilms. And we want them to come out. So this is when we strategically start adding in some of these foods, and they come out because they want to live and survive, and they come out to eat. And then that's when we're killing them. So we'll purposely put the WO oils down there and stuff, and then we'll have a meal that would typically flare the person up. So there's a strategic time after you get all the guys down and backed into the biofilm, and then maybe it's 2 weeks later, maybe it's a month later, and then you start giving them the foods that would flare it up with the killers. They've been on the killers during the SIBO part, right? They've been on the SIBO diet, still on the killers, because we want them to kill some, and we want them to back up, but then we start adding the foods back in with the killer still. Y'all following me? Okay. When do you use a FODMAP diet? Well, after we resolve most of the condition, we don't want to start throwing fermented foods down there and foods that might feed them in case, we still have some left back in there, and of course we do. So we want to start on a normal diet with a low FODMAP diet. Google it. Low FODMAP foods, high FODMAP foods. So I tell my patients, just Google it. And they go, oh, okay. Yeah, eat from the low FODMAP foods when you start eating normal again. That's how I use the diet with the treatment. Okay. Oh, and I just put that in there as an example, right? There's just a little shopping list. So just for fun, those are low FODMAP foods. And under nuts, the high ones, cashews. I'm going by memory. Cashews. Oh, pistachios. I remember eating pistachios. I found out that those were on the high FODMAP foods. Man, I bloated so fast. Artichokes, right? I mean, but anyways, you pull up the list and they kind of go through that like that. Certain vegetables, certain proteins, certain fruits. You have to really watch your alcohol intake, and you have to watch your alcohol sugars as well. They flare it up. So, all right. I'm going to come back because we're 2 minutes at a break. We'll take a break right now because it's a good place. And then we're going to come back and we're going to go through the classic mistakes. And again, now we're going to apply what you already know. And we're going to see the mistakes that we all have made. Okay, so take a break. Nicole, how much for the break? Okay, she got it. Yeah, I told you you'd be blessed, in this small group. So glad you all are here. Look to the person next to you and say, we were chosen. Do it. Come on. Words are powerful, right? I have to tell this from my son. My son, I'm going to talk a little bit about fasting in a minute. Daniel, what day fast are you on right now? Oh, good. Yeah. So, and he kind of just goes, you know what? I don't know. I'm just going to fast. How long are you going to fast? I don't know. I might eat in 2 days. I might eat in 5. I don't know, 6. Who knows? All my kids are amazing fasters, right? But anyways, he was blessed. Him and his girlfriend made the keto. How many of you tried the keto cookies they made? Amazingly healthy. I mean, those are the best, aren't they? Yeah.
Oh, wow, they were amazing.
He's leaving. He wanted me to say he's leaving, and they only have 2 boxes left of those. So if you
should auction
of the
them off.
keto. Okay. Anyways, he's leaving. So if you want him, go out there, and he's going to be here tomorrow otherwise. But if you want those, yep, right there. So anyways, he wanted me to say that. So he'll be out there for about 5 more minutes if you want to run out and get him. Okay. Yeah, all my kids are avid fasters. I mean, just absolutely amazing. And that, by the way, and they're all like keto. They all do diet variation. A lot of the strategies, that I share, my kids are masters at. So believe me, you could pin my kids down and ask them like any question. They probably know the answer because they've experienced it themselves. All of them have fasted. All of them have been into ketosis. By the way, that's why they make these things, because they figure out healthy ways to do things. All right, so the classic mistakes with SIBO, probiotics. People are putting probiotics down their gut, and oftentimes certain probiotics can make things worse. Lactobacilli are the culprits typically across the board, and it's a little different for everybody, but that seems to be the one. Again, when you're on blogs reading about the stuff, that was like the one that like everybody had to stay away from. So I will say this though, part of the classic mistake though is trying to fix SIBO without probiotics. So that seems like a contradiction. So the timing is key if you look at tips. Okay, so we want to hold off. I put 10 days down because that's kind of like the strong antibiotic time, right? If you will, even using natural antibiotics. Sometimes for some people, though, it could be a month or two before you want to introduce probiotics again, okay? So, but when you do, you start with these types. Typically, the spore and the soil base seem to work better, and that's a good place to start. So you can even Google those types of things, and then you can start moving into your MBC. And by the way, there's a few bacteria in the neurobiotic that are classic for really making a difference, even for the motility issue. So by adding the neurobiotic in later, once you get things under control, is actually going to be a huge part of your protocol. And here's the other great thing. Some people, it's okay, the neurobiotic, because of the enterically coated capsule that makes sure it makes it through the small intestine and ends up in the large intestine. With that said, I've had a few people react to it, probably because they just broke it down sooner. And then their infection is in the lower small intestine, and it did flare them up. Okay, but I've had a few people that are okay with it because of the enterically coated capsule. So my point is this to you. As a practitioner, be wise. Just you could just follow those rules on there. But like I said, the neurobiotic is definitely going to be probably more tolerated than the MBC. There's some ones, like there's some specific bacteria in there. I meant to put them on this, and I forgot. But there's 3 in there that Shane put in there that actually help the motility. And the MMC complex. And by the way, good question in the front. She said she was looking for the MMC complex product. The MMC complex is, it's a complex of the body that moves things out. It's not a product, okay? So the prokinetics products that I mentioned, right? The bind, the C colon, right? The N nerve, ginger, those products help the MMC, all right? Avoid fermented foods until fully recovered. Fermented foods are more hell on SIBO than are the supplements, okay? So wait until you know it's solved. Matter of fact, I thought I was okay several times, and I would eat some yogurt or I would eat some fermented, and it would just not be good. So those tips right there they're worth their weight in gold because I learned the hard way. So just in review, you need probiotics. You just got to wait 10 days, 20 days, a month, maybe 2. And then when you introduce them, be wise. Introduce the spore, the soil base first, maybe the enterically coated capsule neurobiotic, second, and bring them in slowly. If there's a reaction, typically they know within the first hour that they'll react, honestly. Unless it's further down the colon, then it could be a few hours. But, tell them if this happens, stop. Any bloating, stop. okay? So you have to be instructional. All right. I almost said flip the slide. I forgot this was actually right here. It worked once. He flipped the slide for me. Oh, see, now it's not working. All right, there it goes. I think you really just have to really crush that button. So those of you who are speaking, you really have to push the button hard. Second classic mistake, not treating long enough. So, Mr. Patient, Mrs. Patient, you may start to feel better within a week or two because of the treatment, but we're going to keep going much longer than that. Hey, Jack. Everyone turn around and say hello to Jack. Let's embarrass him just a little bit. I don't know that Jack embarrassed, so yeah. No, they are fine, Jack. Anyways, I already used your name up here a few times. It wasn't good. I can just say that right now. No, it was very good. I used his knowledge. Okay. So anyways, they don't treat long enough because they think they're okay oftentimes. You have to go beyond what you think. So mild cases, I just gave you some rules of thumb. Mild cases, a week, 2 weeks. Moderate, 4 to 6. In severe cases, I hate to say it, if they're not using an antibiotic, it could be 3 months. So, and that's, again, combination. The diet, the supplements, right? The killers, the prokinetics, and then eventually the probiotics, right? You're putting the protocol together slowly in your head, seeing it through. We're going to open up for questions, so don't panic. Okay. Classic mistake number 3, the right diet when? I already pre-framed you on this. So talk to me. What diet are we starting with? Carnivore, right? Sibo diet, right? Sibo diet. No fiber, no nothing. Meat and fat. All right. And those who have trouble breaking down fat, you go with lower fat meats, things like that, lower fat. And you can also use what? Thank you. Very good. Vegetarians, yeah, they're going to have a little bit more trouble. But no, then you just put them on. Typically what I do, and I've had these, of course, that's a great question. So what you do is I put them on basically a partial fast where we're just using oils, right? So you use your avocado oil, macadamia oil, olive oil, coconut oils. So I start to, use those types of fats. And there's certain things with them. Hey, try olives. Do olives bother you? There's a little fiber in them. Maybe not. You can put them on some olives. A partial fast is something that I teach, and it's about 500 calories a day. And partial fast can be made up of bone broth, whether vegetarians in this case. But those who are not, you can still do a partial fast. But you make up about 500 to 800 calories max of whatever fats, and oils are really easy. Think about it. 1 tablespoon of oil has how many calories in it? 100, 120. So you can see it doesn't take much to reach that partial fast. And that's what I've done for vegetarians. Great question. And I'm sure you'll be more creative than I with other fats that you could potentially use. But anyway, so either way, so carnivore diet's probably not, I'm going to change that on the slide. That's a really, really great point. Okay, first time I've ever used these slides, so you learn. Okay, the only reason I use carnivore diet is because that's in vogue right now. People are doing a carnivore diet, which I have no problem with it. I have no problem with the vegetarian vegan diet because my theory is what variation? Diet variation. It's like, great. I mean, these people are doing a carnivore diet and they're like, my blood works better. This is better. Every marker I can measure. Okay, stay on that for a year and let's see where you're at then, right? In other words, we are meant to shift diets. And there's no doubt ancient cultures, I'm sure, were in times of a carnivore diet. I witnessed it in one of the last hunting gathering tribes. These people, when they had kill, oh yeah, they were carnivore, all right. They were sick of these foods. But then have enough of these foods, then, they want to shift back. It's human. Okay, so the tips are start with the diet, and then after it's under control, then you can start going into the, I said, no, this is a really important point. I made this point. We add the higher FODMAP foods to bring them out of the biofilm, right? So in other words, we go from the SIBO, then we start adding some of the high FODMAP things in while we're giving them the killers so they come out of the biofilm and zap them. It works. So when you look at the antibiotic treatment, You know, the gastrointestinal people that really understand this, they tell people, no, eat these foods. And they literally send them home with a little list of high FODMAP foods to when they're taking the antibiotic, they learn. Because otherwise it runs in biofilm. They come off the antibiotic, all their symptoms are gone, and then they come back and they realize that they just pulled back into biofilm. So they learn to give them high FODMAP foods to pull them out and then zap them. So we're doing the same thing with the natural killers. We want to pull them out of the biofilms and we nail them. Then you can use some of the FBR, you can use FBR in the neuroprebiota. Is just 2 products. If you just say, hey, take this. And then they take those prebiotics and boom, you're there with the killers. Here's what I do. I'll tell them to put WO in a little bit of the prebiotic. I poison it. And if you let it soak in, it'll soak into the fiber. So let it sit there for 5 minutes and absorb into the fiber, whether it's a capsule or a powder. Now you've poisoned their food. Pretty cool. It works. I've even done that. If you look at the ingredients, if you look at the psyllium husk, there's soluble and insoluble. Remember, the bacteria will feed from the soluble, not the insoluble. But again, you take psyllium husk and you put WO in with it, or even a strong oregano, and it absorbs into it, and it becomes this poison bomb that goes right down the colon and poisons, and it also acts as great motility. So it's a win-win. So anyways, those are just the tricks I learned. And then after you get them well, then what diet do you go to break the diet? The low FODMAP diet. Okay, so it's no FODMAP foods, Sibo diet. Then it's give them high FODMAP foods with the killers to pull them out of biofilm. And then once we get them well, we don't just jump into a regular diet. We go to a low FODMAP diet so we don't flare it up. Because at that point, they're not on killers, so you better not throw a lot of high FODMAP foods down there. Otherwise, you're going to stir the pot. Make sense? Are we good on the diet? How to utilize the diet with the killers? Everyone's good? Ask a question now. Okay. All right, good. All right. Number 4. Okay, I just pushed that as hard as I can push it. That's not, okay, so it's not pushing the button harder. Okay. All right. The carnivore diet, is that similar to the Atkins diet? No, it's not similar. I mean, it's similar in the fact that it potentially could be high protein, but it's just no fiber. I mean, Atkins diet, you could still have fiber. There's vegetables, right? This is no vegetables. Remember, no fiber, zero, no sugar, no nothing. It's carnivore in the sense that it's fat and meat. That's it. Because fiber is the food. Everyone got it? Got it? Okay. All right. Good question. All right. Number 4, not addressing co-infections. And I said this, right? Candida, parasites can be a reason for reoccurrence of SIBO. Very important. So at a certain point, even parasite, I talked about Candida, with the blog people. Parasites are another one that at some point you're going to want to address them. So you could be doing a parasite protocol, and y'all know those protocols. I'm not going to go through that, and maybe someone's going to share that even this weekend. But you could be doing that maybe after the 2nd week of just using bacteria killers, that first page that I gave you, and then moving into a specific parasite protocol. Because if they have parasites, it's going to drive inflammation, and you can get reoccurrences. So tips, obviously, Hpa. I love the straight up bottle where you can do high doses of the Hpa. I love Hpa for this. Like WO, it's always, I think we have some SIBO people in the room, Hpa. Andrea, was that one of your go-tos as well? So WO and Hpa, right? Yeah, and that's what I found too. So Hpa definitely knocks down the co-infections really well. And of course, we know the VRMs. And WO is awesome because it works on kind of all the co-infections. Again, maybe another reason why WO is so powerful, right? Because WO, obviously, I think it's I think it works on some of those good guys, but it crushes parasites and it works even into the candida. So I think that's why WOs are our number one tool. All right, number 5 is the ileocecal valve. And just for, I know you all know this, but we'll just, do it anyway. Okay, between the ASIS and the umbilicus is halfway in that diagonal line. Approximately, you dig in there. It's easier with the knee up on the back, and you will find your own, but you teach the patient. You'll find a tender spot, find it, move around. When you find that tender spot, that's probably an ileocecal valve that's partly inflamed, which means it could be left open. So you rotate for about 20 to 30 seconds, and they always say pull up towards the shoulder. Just kind of work it up to, I go in a circle, and then I work it up towards the shoulder to close it. I'll tell people to do that at least 3 times a day for a few days. And well, when do I stop? When it's not tender anymore. So if you don't close the ileocecal valve, the bacteria from the large intestine will keep running into the small intestine, and you'll never solve anything. So that is a big issue. Now, granted, there are reasons why the ileocecal valve can be a problem. And that can be vagal nerve related, which again, we talked about, cranial adjustments, upper cervical adjustments, past head traumas. Susie, we were just talking about that. I mean, all of those can be problematic with that vagus nerve, and then that will affect that MMC, not getting the debris out. Also, again, when their infections in their mouth aren't taken care of, you're constantly putting bacteria this way, which these bacteria they're so toxic to the microbiome, it will keep that neurological component to the ileocecal valve. It'll just keep opening it up. And we know that a sudden input of bad bacteria will cause the inflammation in that area, and it can keep that ileocecal valve not functioning. Neurotoxicity, the mouth, trauma, head trauma, upper cervical subluxation, all of these things can end up with a problem with the ileocecal valve. So again, we're giving you the maneuver for it, but you better be upstream with it. But I train my people to make sure it stays closed during the treatment. Because if we can keep it closed long enough, oftentimes we can reduce the inflammation. And maybe the aloe helps there too. The end nerve, definitely in the C colon. That's why that's in there as well. But anyway, so we want to keep that sucker closed. Always, always, always check it after and during a fast. Even if people are intermittent fasters, make sure that they just check that every once in a while to make sure it's closed, because they can be affected even more so. All right, classic mistake number 6. We already talked a lot about this, is not addressing the motility issues. There's the migrating motor complex that we talked about. This is the cleansing wave that cleans the small intestine. The big tip here is staying on bind and staying on the prokinetics. And again, you have the list of prokinetics. Here's the additional one that I didn't tell you about. Coffee enemas and the PC push, phosphatidylcholine push, or a bile push, probably is a better name for it. Coffee enemas, you guys know how to do a coffee enema. Always, always, always do a coffee enema. Take bind 30 minutes to an hour max before you do a coffee enema. What does a coffee enema do? It pushes the bile out. And typically it's a hepatic biliary sludge. It's toxic bile, which is also shown to keep the ileocecal valve open. So the bile really affects that ileocecal valve. So there's one that I kept out until this moment to tell you. So binding that bile complex with the bind as a catcher's mitt using a coffee enema, it also keeps the ileocecal valve closed. So it affects motility. It affects that good bacteria from working its way back up into the small intestine. If you don't have time for coffee enema, you can do the bile push, which can be done with phosphatidylcholine, which is probably the best way. Straight up phosphatidylcholine, because you need phosphatidylcholine to make bile. And also it's a super dense oil that you need a lot of bile to digest. and it dumps the bile, and then there is the bind in there to pull that toxic complex out of the body so it doesn't keep the motility affected and keep opening the ileocecal valve. You can also do that with ghee. Ghee is another fat that will dump bile great. It's a short-chain fatty acid, which actually works great on the lining of the intestines and the small intestines. They love those short-chain fatty acids. So that's a win-win a different way. So I like to do both for people. But it's as simple as this. Let's just use ghee as the example. 2 tablespoonfuls of ghee. Oh, I have trouble digesting that. Great. Take some ox bile or bile salts with it. So back up. I made the classic mistake. I did that on purpose to teach you not to make that mistake. You take what first? 30 minutes ahead. Take my bind. 2 tablespoons of ghee. Boom, dump that bile complex right into the bind. Man, when I was sick, that protocol saved my world. It really did. It opens up the liver too, which the liver is part of this problem. So that's a really important tool. I'm going to give you one more. I didn't put it on here. So those are going to miss it unless they were here. All right. At my next seminar, which is in Vegas, by the way, I hope y'all come, November 2nd through the 4th, there'll be a gentleman there with about, I think he's selling it for about $700, I think, at my seminar, which is cheaper than what it sells online for, but it's an ozone generator. I have one. I told my group this afternoon, I do it 5 days a week. I do 5 on, and then I take 2 days off. But rectal ozone is amazing. And it's so easy. It's so much easier than a coffee enema. And it really works the same way. So the ozone, you just simply, this thing makes ozone very quickly and, right in the rectum in a little tube that's the size of a pencil, less than that. And you only need to put it in about that far, and it goes right up the portal vein. And it dumps the liver. That's one of the benefits of it. And I'm telling you, you're pooing for it clears you, just like a coffee enema. So much easier though, but there's a way bigger benefit than a coffee enema because we used to think of ozone as just an oxidative killer. It's not. It does so much more than that. It actually drives healthy immunity. Autoimmune people, Hashimoto's, I'm telling you, in 2 weeks, 5 days, 2 off, 5 days, have them remeasure their thyroid hormone. You'll see an absolute, thyroid antibodies. You'll see an absolute change. Crohn's, colitis, IBS. So again, with these hard Sibo cases, it does magic. It really is. So that's how I got hooked on it. So, and then my wife and I realized, holy cow, it puts so much oxygen. By the way, studies show Joe Mercola was doing the IVs. He won't even do it now. He just does this because it shows that it's just as effective as doing the IV ozone. So why are you going to spend all that money? Why are you spend $200 and go to the doctor's office, right? Or why are you going to sit there for over an hour and do a 10 pass when you can just do ozone at home? I mean, literally 5 minutes, you're done. Did it this morning. So, and I'm telling you, it's magic for energy. It's magic for this. It's magic for Crohn's, colitis. Get on the blogs. Magic. Oh, it's also magic. All the infections here that people have, you get with it, you buy the little ear things and you put it in your ears and you ozonate. You can even do the sinuses. You just can't breathe it in your lungs. Ozone's not good for the lung tissue. But I'm telling you, it's a gift. It really is. Ozone's a powerful tool. And the rectal ozone is just so easy to do. And like I said, it dumps the bile out. It cleans the liver. And it drives immunity. It brings oxygen into cells. I mean, it goes right in. It goes right up the portal vein and it diffuses right into your bloodstream. So, yeah, just Google rectal ozone, and you'll have fun reading all about it and watching some of the videos. So, the Hpa Axis is key. So there we have the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenals, which also plays a big role in the parasympathetic tone. So one of the things is that people, I gave the tips there, but I already gave those tips. Let me make it more fun for you because you guys are here. One of the tips is utilizing acupuncture, which can be really dramatic in getting people who are stuck in a sympathetic mode into a parasympathetic mode. And there's different types of acupuncture and those things, but utilize that for your hard SIBO cases. Here's another tip. So what you can do is when you go from hot to cold or cold to hot, you can absolutely put someone in a parasympathetic state. So again, reading blogs, I found out that people that have trouble sleeping, et cetera, and digesting, well, to put themselves in a parasympathetic state to get better sleep, what they do is they go hot, cold. So they do cold shower, and then they get into a hot shower. Or the opposite. They do a hot shower and do cold shower, see which way it works better for you. How do I know which way it works better for me? Because I have an Aura ring, a $200 to $300 little ring that is as accurate as you could measure anything. And it measures your heart rate variability, which you get your baseline. I can look at my heart rate variability and know, holy cow, my heart rate variability is in the tank. Well, that means I'm sympathetic. And I can watch it change when I do these different things. So when the first time I got acupuncture, I was like, holy cow, it dramatically changed my sympathetic load into a parasympathetic load. My balance got better, like after like 2 treatments. So I know that works. So, and then when I do the hot cold thing, I see a major shift for 2 days into parasympathetic. It's really cool. With this ring, I can look at what's called a hammock effect. When you actually have your lowest heart rate, it should be about in the middle of the night, and you can see, and also you can see what affects your deep sleep. So if I have more than, 2 glasses of wine, I know I'm going to cut my deep sleep in half. It's predictable. So maybe for you, it's looking at screens before bed, and that crushes your deep sleep. That doesn't seem to affect mine as much, but other people, it sure does. So you can see your habits at night, and then you can see, well, that's killing me. Food too close to bed crushes my deep sleep, crushes it. And without deep sleep, you're not recovering. That's going to put you more in a sympathetic tone. That's going to put your digestion in more. It's going to affect your peristalsis. So in REM sleep, without enough REM sleep, that affects peristalsis. So anyways, this little ring is a godsend, and I went over it with my group just showing them all the things it measures. And of course, it measures your activity, and there's a recovery, whether you're ready to work out hard or not. You can look at all those. It looks at all those parameters and says, take it easy today. Matter of fact, don't even work out, because that's how bad your numbers look right now. It assesses your body temperature. It assesses everything. I think for the price, it is the greatest tool for your health. Aura, O-U-R-A. Dyslexic. Say it. No, wait. Yeah. I said it right? O-U-R-A. Okay, with dyslexia, believe me, you could convince me I was wrong, and I'd be like, I'm probably wrong. Okay. The weak vagal tone, I feel like we've really hit this. The upper cervical adjustments are key. Here's a trick. I told you my tips and tricks for your patients. So if right after, let's say they're getting symptoms, one of the things they can do right away is start gargling. Gargling. It works. What does it do? What does gargling do? Do you know? Yeah, it puts you out of sympathetic, and it stimulates digestion via stimulating parasympathetic. So it's like something as simple as gargling can actually kick someone's symptoms out. So, who would think? But it works. It works. And of course, I just re-mentioned the end nerve C-colon combination. All right, Tyson, I don't know what you're doing up there, but you're in control. Next slide. I'm going to put this down now. I'll keep it just so I think I'm in control. All right, number 7, enzyme deficiencies. We talked about that, right? It can be pancreatic, bile, HCl enzymes, all of those. And there's the supportive. The little trick that I didn't give you is the apple cider vinegar before meals, which can stimulate HCl. I'll tell you what, a lot of people have enzyme deficiencies, though, and Dr. Jason Fung's going to talk about this at my seminar, but it's because they eat the standard American diet, and they're pushing glucose, and basically they end up with fatty pancreas, fatty liver. And those organs now don't produce I don't care what they take, until you get the fatty out of the organ. And unfortunately, the only way, Jason's experience and mine, is fasting. And not necessarily even long fast, but weekly fast, periodic fast, everything that I teach at my seminar, yeah, that's the key. So, he's not at the helm up there. Oh, it switched that time. I think if I do this and hard and pray right before, and it's getting too complicated, man. You just got to do it. All right. It's kind of like Sibo. It's like, okay, this is it. This is working. And you realize that, nope, none of it's working until I take all the food out of the diet except meat and fat. All right. This is, okay, so I'm shifting gears. I should have had a gear shifting slide. Any questions on any of that before I talk about this? I mean, I really want to, yes. Yeah, pass the mic. And by the way, the reason I even talked about the hormone perimenopause issue, because Sibo actually plays into this massively. So it's like I almost said, okay, before I teach this in thyroid, and again, I don't have time, and I knew I wouldn't have time. I'm going to share a component with both of these. I gave you the protocol basic thing, but with Sibo and this other little gem I'm going to give you, I'm going to be able to hit both of these in 10 minutes. Yes? Question.
Okay,
Karen.
so I can see how you could test that you resolve the Sibo in someone who bloats after you've done all the things you've said. What about the person who has Sibo and they say, I never feel bloating, but they have Sibo, and they're just like, I can't even tell. I have this extra weight here. I don't know if I'm bloating or not.
Well, I would just say, how do you feel when you don't eat? How do you feel when you eat meat and fat? Better. You still have Sibo. Because you're right, to your point. Bloating is one of the symptoms. It's probably the classic symptom, right? I mean, constipation, diarrhea, either one. I mean, but everyone has those, right? I mean, not everyone has those. Everyone that we deal with these issues have that. So testing with the diet is key. Trying with or without, adding fiber back in, prebiotics. I mean, it's like that's really the key. And then when they go without food or a Sibo diet, and then they add it back in, that's the key. Typically, they're so screwed up, they don't know what's going on. So you almost have to baseline them with a Sibo diet and then add something back in. So like I told you on the call the other day, just do it even for 2 days. Okay, I do feel better. Rule out that they're digesting fat or able to digest fat. I do feel better. Okay, great. Take this. Take a thing of the prebiotic. Take FBR. Eat garlic or onions. Oh my God. That's the best way to tell, honestly. Because to your point, when I had Sibo the first time, I was getting bloating. But after that, I would just eat dinner, even at 5 o'clock. At 3 in the morning, I would just get this pressure and pain. But I wasn't bloated. It was lower in my intestine. So it didn't, sometimes people get the big upper thing. I didn't get that because my bacteria were lower in my intestine. So I just got pressure. It just hurt. So I didn't get bloating. And by the way, I didn't burp and I didn't fart either. Did I just say that? Did I just say that? Okay.
Yeah.
I felt like I was talking to family because it was Carrie. So anyways, so I didn't get that. I mean, maybe a little bit, but it didn't stink. I didn't have that. I just had this massive pressure. So there you go.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.